This was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Dave in East Alton, Illinois. Tony Khan recently made comparisons of Moxley and Jericho to being his Flair and Sting. I just wanted to get your thoughts around that statement. I'm pretty sure MJF would be a better comparison to Flair if he'd allow him to evolve naturally and maybe Wardlow in the Sting spot. Either way, Jericho is more like your Jimmy Valiant. Not sure where Moxley fits in, but one thing for sure, the Bucks are your ding-dongs. Well, he added some of his own commentary there at the end, but what are your thoughts on Tony comparing Moxley and Jericho to Flair and Sting in terms of what they mean to AEW and what those other two meant to WCW?
Well, again, I'm flabbergasted. In all honesty, right now, Tony doesn't have a Flair or a Sting. Because maybe actually the closest comparison to Sting may be MJF.
To Sting?
To Sting.
Why?
Because I'm not talking about, because there's no similarity between any of these people as wrestlers. And the comparison that Tony was making was he thinks that Ric Flair and Sting were the two top stars of WCW, and he's claiming that Jericho and Moxley are his two top stars. But when you think about it, Sting had never really, besides the brief run with Eddie Gilbert in Mid-South, where he was featured but not a main event guy, he had never been used on really any spot in any territory. He was only a couple of years in the business. And he gets over in WCW through the working with Ric Flair, who had that famous Clash of Champions match with him and was doing in-ring on-the-job training with him every night. So Sting was the first real breakout star that Crockett Promotions, 1988, Crockett and TBS working together, homegrown star that they created. MJF is that guy on the other side in AEW. They don't have any similarities as wrestlers, but MJF is in the main event mix, and Sting was in the main event mix with other guys that were veterans. So then who would be Flair? I'm going to say it's neither Moxley nor Jericho. It's Punk. Because Punk, like Flair at the time was an established superstar that had been a world champion and or a main event guy for, at the time Sting came along in WCW, 12, 13 years, and was the guy who wrestled Sting in his most high-profile match to make him that new, young, homegrown star. So that would put Punk in the Flair spot and MJF in the Sting spot. What star has Chris Jericho made to be in the Flair spot? What star has Jon Moxley made to be in the Flair spot? And why would either Jericho or Moxley be considered for the Sting spot since they're on the downhill slide of their careers rather than bursting onto the scene and going straight to the top like Sting did during that period of time? So his comparisons are all fucked up.
But you're focusing on 88 through 90. I think, and again, I'm just guessing here, what Tony may be saying is that if you look at the entirety of WCW from 88 until 2001, Flair and Sting were this constant you could always return to, like a mantra. You could always go back to Flair versus Sting. Maybe that's how he sees, besides the age differences and the experience differences of Flair and Sting, that's how maybe he sees Moxley and Jericho.
Well, but there's another difference also. Flair and Sting at that point were neither one of them so old that and so limited that every time that you fucking put them together in a match, it was worse than the one before. It was usually better than the one before. Every time you see Jericho and Moxley, it gets worse. I don't agree with the comparisons.